Interface Video presents Fairhope Hospice Today. Brought to you by Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan, Fairfield Medical Center, the Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities, Dagger Law, and the Frank E. Smith Funeral Home.
Welcome to Fairhope Hospice Today. I'm Kristen Glazier, President and CEO here at Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, home of the Pickering House, and I am happy to speak to you today, and we are coming to you live from Tracy Miller's office. Tracy is our grief support manager here at Fairhope Hospice. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, glad to have you today. We are in a whole different setting today. This is kind of a nice change, but we really wanted to take some time today just to talk about our grief support services here at Fairhope. It's such an important part of really what we do every day. We're so thankful to have your team, and I thought it would be great just to take a peek around here and to talk a little bit about what you provide to this community and the services that you provide to our Fairhope families, but also the children in the community.
And we are pleased to do that. I have had the privilege of being in this position for 12 years now, and behind us are artwork from the children that we have supported over the years, and this room has artwork on every wall. I've been told it's one of the busier walls in the community, but I say that because we have the stories of the children around us, and it's lovely to have that. And then we also are blessed to have a window that looks out onto the woods, so anybody who's here in our office can get a bit of nature, which is a calming force.
When you just said that you were here and you've been doing this for 12 years, I kind of had to think, wow, 12 years. Can you tell our viewers today a little bit about how that got started?
Sure. And so the first time I walked through the doors of the Pickering House was in 2007, holding the hand of a loved one. I came back again in 2008, and between those two moments, I had decided to become a volunteer. And so I had talked with Twyla Summers, our volunteer manager, and I had agreed to start taking classes. And so in 2008, I was here again with a loved one, and then I was scheduled to begin volunteer classes the very next day. So one day I'm here at the Pickering House with a loved one as he passes. The next day I come back and I become a volunteer. Yeah. And then I was a volunteer for 2 years, and then I was given the chance to start a program, just working maybe 8 to 10 hours a month to help support children, and that quickly grew to 15 hours a month, and then that grew to weekly. And then I stepped away from my teaching job and was here part-time for Lancaster City Schools. And then 2 years away from retirement in the schools, I left to help grow this program. And we are pleased to say that we are here, especially with our children's program, and almost 1,500 children later.
Wow, and here you are on TV.
I'm on TV.
Come a long way, huh? You know, we really wanted to take a minute today just to kind of talk about how important grief support is. And as the start of school is happening, you know, we have a lot of children in the communities that we serve and that you hear from that just have been through a lot. They've had a lot of death, a lot of loss at different levels. We have a lot of grandparents who are raising, you know, their grandchildren. So we just see a lot of different things. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like for you in the schools as we start this new school year?
And as we start the school year, we are always humbled that we have active partnerships with schools. And those partnerships, if you did not know any differently, we are welcomed into the school buildings. The staff makes sure that we have a designated space to meet with children, to provide that one-to-one support. And so we have partnerships with Lancaster City Schools, Fairfield Union Schools, Pickerington in their elementaries and middle schools, and Logan Hawking schools. And what happens is the social workers or the guidance counselors will refer a child to us, and then at the elementary level, we will go in and provide 4 weeks of usually individual support to that child. Then at the middle school, we will do either individual or group. And then at the high school level, especially at Lancaster High School and Fairfield Union High School, we have had every other week drop-in groups where we work with children. And one of the interesting little postscripts on this is we worked with a young man for 4 years at Fairfield Union High School, And recently, one of our retired staff members had to be in the hospital, and the particular person who was assisting him in the hospital was a person that he once supported at the high school.
Wow.
So that was a sweet gesture to see that something that we had helped support someone to be able to go out and have the life that they needed to live, which was wonderful to see.
You know, I think sometimes we think that with children, if you don't talk about it, if you push this away, if you just kind of ignore the topic, then things go away, things get better. But that's really not the case. You know, with my social work background and all the knowledge that you have, you know, you really need to work through and face head on and address the grief issues. So for instance, this young man has made it through school, now he's in his career, and you know, it's hard to know what happens if they don't process that grief.
Exactly, and it's such a thrill for us to see people be able to, you know, the teens, you know, anybody we supported through the elementary, through the teens, you know, be able to feel that their grief is heard. The premise of the entire children's grief program, we call that PALS, which stands for Peace, Acceptance, Love, and Support, is that they were heard. And we wanted to make sure that they're heard. And we are blessed here at Fairhope that we do it in a variety of ways. The other part that we really need to stress, and people don't always realize this, is that any of our grief support, whether it's for children or adults, is provided free of charge. And you don't have to have a loved one on our hospice service to get that support, which means we are talking to individuals who have a loved one that may have died as the result of a car accident, an unexpected medical emergency, an overdose, sadly a suicide. And so we will meet people with various losses, and the one common denominator is everybody's heart hurts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, I think that's so important. I know that you said it, and I was thinking it, that you know, we are able, by this wonderful community that supports us, to provide all of those services for free, no cost.
Right.
And just knowing that the community families can go to their teachers, they can make a phone call here to 740-654-7077 and ask for some guidance and you know, to talk to someone about getting some grief support wherever that may be, at home, at the schools, even here at our grief center.
And it's important that we continue to meet the need when the need arises to the best that we can. And the important part too, to speak to what you mentioned about telling children the truth, people will look and they will say, well, how can you keep doing this? You know, you've been doing this for 12 years. And I say, I meet children when they're sad. You don't get to see the children when they start to talk about their loved one, be able to hold on to the memories, and then move from the sad to having some of the smiles. And we don't want them to not have sad moments, because we all do when we think about those who have meant something to us. But we also need to let them know that it's okay to live your life to thrive and to have those moments of happiness. The other part that I think we bring to the table is when we go in, we use what I call the D words. We will say die, dead, death. Children need to hear those words, and they want to hear the words. They want to be able to talk about it. And so we go in, and in a sense, we make that conversation okay to have.
Do you think sometimes that's, if families don't want to share those actual words because they're not sure if the children will understand, if they'll accept it, if it'll scare them?
I think that, and I think no parent, no grandparent wants to see a child cry.
Yeah.
So I look at the tears and I say that those tears are a sign of love. So we are very blessed that the schools recognize that we come in and provide a place of safety, and that we are open to having those conversations. And it depends on your perspective. Fortunately or sadly, we have done those conversations a while, so that we don't have that shock value on anything that someone's going to tell us.
Yeah.
We can sit there and meet the child where they are.
Yeah. You know, I know we have just a few minutes left here in this segment, but I kind of want to touch on how you manage things when you meet with a student. So it's absolutely not grief counseling. And we talk about that a lot, and that's important because we're going to give these students the tools that they need to cope, and they can use those for the rest of their lives.
And so we say education and support. We do not use the term grief counseling because sometimes people think counseling implies that there's a problem to be fixed. Grief is not a problem to be fixed, it's to be supported. So basically we go in and we just say, we're here to hear the story. Tell us about grandma, tell us about grandpa. And I always start with, I say, I have a job where I talk with boys and girls who've had someone special who has died. I hear that's happened to you. Is it all right if I talk with you? And the child looks at me and they say, sure, let me tell you the story.
You've kind of made it safe by opening with that sentence.
And I give them the empowerment. They can make that choice for themselves. And so far, everybody wants to talk.
Nice, very nice. Well, if you're interested at all in, if there's someone that you love, someone that you're concerned about that may need some grief support, please feel free to call here into Fairhope Hospice. The number is 740-654-7077. You can go to our website, which is fairhopehospice.org. Tracy is glad to take phone calls. Your life is probably about to get pretty busy, and we're thankful that you're here for us.
And we appreciate being here. It's been a wonderful journey.
So we'd like for you to stay tuned for the next segment. You're joining us today at Fairhope Hospice Today.
When I volunteer, when I come over here, the first thing I think about is my dad. But then also think about all the people that helped us when we were here.
Something brings me here, and I feel that it's my dad's spirit. He wants us here. He wants us to give back because of what I did for him. And I think that's helped me with a lot of my grief.
The support of the people here and the volunteers. That makes it a great place.
Can I visit my doctor online?
Our providers offer telehealth appointments that fit your schedule, allowing you to get the care you need when you need it. Whatever you're searching for, you can find it at Fairfield Medical Center. You walked down the aisle and promised happily ever after. Sometimes happily ever after means ending a relationship. We know the conversations are not easy. Deciding what's best for you, your children, and your next steps takes work and communication. At Dagger Law, we know there are no monsters in a divorce, only people trying to find their way. Local, trusted, experienced. Dagger Law.
You quit smoking and thought, that's that. But here's the thing about lung cancer. By the time you see the symptoms, it could be too late. But now, there's a new scan that can detect lung cancer early, when it's more curable. If you smoked, get scanned. Talk to your doctor or learn more at savedbythescan.org.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
We could not have done, as a family, what the Pickering House did for my dad. No way. I mean, you just can't match that care, at home.
They made the whole entire family feel comfortable every step of the way.
Welcome back to Fairhope Hospice Today. We are having a great conversation here in the Anita M. Turner Center with Tracy Miller, our grief support manager, and we are blessed to have her with us. We've been talking about a lot of difficult things, but a lot of good work that we do and that you and your team do.
And again, a lot of what we do is because of those partnerships with our school districts, and I always have to give them the credit for allowing us to come in. And if you didn't know better, you would think that we were part of the regular staff, because they welcome us in, make sure we have space. And the students was always amazing, especially the little ones. If we've worked with them 1 or 2 sessions, is they will come into the office, and people who don't know us will happen to be in the office, and they're stunned that they're hugging us, and they're wanting to, have their story told. So it's beautiful. And then the school staff, when we create some of our special memory making projects, activities, the administrative assistants, the secretaries are so sweet to look at those, and they want to hear the story, and so they're there to be that support.
Well, I think that really shows that there's a lot of healing all the way around. Plus, it's teaching those employees really how to accept that and feel comfortable with the students talking about their loss.
And I think that's the beautiful point. My background is I was a speech therapist in the schools. The reason I mentioned that is I knew that I had the students for a moment in time, and I was supposed to help them be heard, and then they were going to go return to their class. This program has been modeled after that, so that we know that we're coming in for a period of time to help the children, and then they need to go back and do their regular activities at school. We will be there as support, or especially as they get older and they feel that loss at a new awareness level, we will be there for them. But we know that we come in for a moment in time.
So we talked a little earlier in the other segment about how you got your start at Fairhope. How did you get your start at the schools? I mean, how did you bring Fairhope and the grief team into the schools?
This may sound a little ego-driven. I don't really mean it to be. Honestly, I called somebody that I knew at the schools, and they said, hey, we have a student who's hurting. Can you come and talk to the child? I said, sure. And so we went in, and then I drew on my background of education, and we created a workbook that we use with the children. And so we will keep that, always mindful that whatever we are doing, we also wanted to have an academic basis. So if we're taking them out of academic time, we're going to make sure that we include some elements of reading, some elements of writing, some elements of reasoning. And so from there, it started just with one student, and then they came in and asked for more. And then people who worked in one district knew people in another district, so it's been all by word of mouth. And so that has so it's spread organically. And so again, we come in and just present ourselves. I go in and say, I'm Tracy, here, be a help. So it started from those previous relationships, and because those were connected to others, that's how we got it going.
That's pretty neat. And the trust was there, and so it just it felt like just kind of fluid to bring you back in.
And it was interesting the first few years that I was doing this, especially in Lancaster, when they had not built their new buildings yet, and they had their older buildings. They would have us go work in small rooms. Well, those happened to be the same rooms that I was in as a speech therapist. So I was going back into the same space, but doing it for a different reason.
Did you confuse your hats sometimes?
I looked at it, and so honestly, in the schools, I was called Mrs. Miller. If I go in now, you hear me call myself Tracy. I think it's because I don't want to confuse myself. I want to go back and make sure that I'm not doing speech therapy work. But we're and so we bring some things to the schools. I have some of the items that we work with children. We know that we are going to get the children to experience the emotions of grief, and sometimes we feel those in our stomach, in our breathing, and our heart rate. So when we meet with children, I will give them some of these little building pieces, and they can create different activities. Oh, you want to create? All right, I'm going to give you a pile.
So does this seem to help sort of take their anxiety out while they're talking with you about?
Usually what I'll say is when I meet, because I don't always lead with the book, I say, people don't know what to do with their hands, so I give you these to play with. So I will let them have that. And so as we're talking, I will ask to hear the story of their loved one, and about the illness, if there's an illness, or the cause of death, the manner of death, anything that they want to share. During that time when they start talking about the death is when they will start to feel it either in their stomach, their breathing, or their heart rate. We have found is that if they hold on to something cold in those moments, that allows their body to calm down. So as they're finishing with that, I will usually freeze some of our putty, because in COVID, I cannot sanitize my ice packs. So we will freeze these. So you come to our freezer here. We have a whole bunch in the freezer. And we will give these to children. It'll be very cold. They will hold on to it. They will take a deep breath. and then their body starts to calm. They start to self-regulate, and then they're able to hear the discussions and the questions that we're asking. But if you want to play with one of those, you're welcome to play with the putty.
So Tracy, when they're working with this, and then you're speaking to them about, then they're starting to tell their story, are you able to sense when they kind of have that feeling? Can you see the breathing change? And so that's when you present with this.
So usually what will happen is if I start to see that we're talking about a loved one, and let's say we're talking about grandma, and grandma had cancer and grandma's death, you will start to see children's posture get tense. And I'll say, hey, do me a favor. Let me know if I get your stomach feeling a little funny, or your breathing change, your heart rate change. And then you can see that on them. So then I'll say, hey, I'm curious. Do I have your stomach feeling different? Yeah. Hey, would you like me to make that feel better? And then I give them a cold item to hold on to. I will tell you, it is something incredible to see. As soon as they hold on to the cold, what they will do is they'll take a breath. And I'll say, let me know when your stomach feels better. And they'll tell me. And then we'll start to talk more, and we'll work in our workbook.
So it's kind of getting over that first hurdle.
And we also want to give them a tool so that when they start to feel that way, because the way that gets stored in our brain, anytime we start to feel that way, I'm a stomach person, so I always talk about stomachs. When I start to feel that stomach that way, I am going to think back to my loved ones who died. So we teach that to the kids so that they understand when that happens, that is just the way the brain stored it. I call it bossy brain. And the way that it got stored, and then we give them a tool so that when it happens in the future, they can find ways to deal with that instead of having any anger outburst or starting negative self-talk. We also use it with adults.
I was just going to go there. You know, oftentimes, for those of you that may not know, Tracy and her team come to the Pickering House, and they will help our families who are there, who are maybe in, you know, they have a loved one that's there that's approaching end of life, and maybe they're feeling some anxiety and some stress about those. We've done this. We've done the ice and the ice chips, and when you hand it to them, it really, you can really see what it does. And so it works with kids and adults, and I just think it's remarkable to watch.
And that came to me from my training as a speech therapist, and then working with occupational therapists and physical therapists in the schools, and then my trauma training. Kind of took it all together, and we came up with this, and it has been such a powerful suggestion so that children realize they are not the ones having a weakness moment. This is bossy brain being the boss, and here's how you can make this happen. And they come up with strategies. I had a young man whose mother died, and going to practice was very difficult because mom would drive him to practice. So what we had him do is take a bottle of water, pour out the top half, freeze the bottom half so it became an ice cube. He would put water in the top half. He could hold that as he got to the practice field. Once he got onto the field, he was fine, but he had that cold to hold on to get to the field.
Wow.
And again, it wasn't so much the games because mom and dad both were there for that, but it was the practice. And so we use that strategy too for children to let them know, here's some ways that you can manage that.
You know, that brings up a really good point, because I think sometimes most people would not have picked up on the fact that he was anxious because mom always took him to practice or to the games. So what kind of things do we need to look for as parents and teachers and just people in the, you know, that have young ones? What do we look for to know that they're struggling?
Again, if you see after a death of a loved one, a child avoiding some areas, if you see a child who becomes more frustrated, more argumentative, and you see that that might be happening in a certain location, or if a certain topic comes up, I always just ask, let me know how your body's feeling, and then we will always put that in there. Before we end any session in the school, we will say, is your body feeling better? And so we let them know that. So I think you just look for changes in the behavior, and then if we have an opportunity to educate people about the cold technique, as I call it, or the cold trick, we will let them know that. And so we encourage people to use that at any moment. And so I think you just look for that tension, that change.
So if there are some parents or grandparents that are watching today and they just maybe are uncomfortable reaching out to the school, how can they get tips that will teach them and give them some of these things to look for and the right things to say or what to say?
Some of this information is on our website at fairhopehospice.org. under grief and then family grief. The other, if you need some suggestions, we often will talk to people on the phone and give people instructions. We can also mail some of our handouts or email our handouts. Again, my background is education and support, which works beautifully because the purpose of our grief team is to provide education and support. So we continue to do that.
Great. And that number that they'll need to call is 740-654-7077. As Tracy mentioned, fairhopehospice.org will get you to our website to gather some information there. We also have a really interactive Facebook page, which often has some tips for just support and for grief. So please go ahead and go to that page and like us, and you can gather some information from there.
And I have our wristbands. Can I tell you a favorite wristband story?
Yes, please
All
do.
Right. So these wristbands, they say Fairhope Hospice Pals on there. And then we at Fairhope believe in celebrating life. So it says celebrate life. And we have, for those who like blue, we have blue. For those who like the pink, we have the pink. But what is special about these is they glow in the dark. So when I give them to a child, I will say, would you like one of our wristbands? Yes. And I said, you know what I really like about this? When I find that I'm missing my mom, I have this, and in my bedroom at night, it will glow in the dark, and then I know that I'm not alone, and I feel her love. Now, an extra special story on this is we gave this to somebody up at the Pickering house whose dad died on our service, and she was not able to be here at the time of death, which is not unusual. Most children are not present when a loved one dies. They're usually with friends, family, or asleep, which is exactly where the patient needs them to be. So after her father died, she goes, I just have one question. Was he wearing the wristband that I gave him to wear? And I said, yeah, he was wearing that. And so interestingly, I don't always check on those things when someone passes. In this case, I did. And he was wearing this. And her reaction was one that totally surprised me. She goes, oh, that's wonderful. Because you know what? When they put his box in the ground, he's going to have this glow in the dark, and he's going to know he's not alone.
Oh my goodness.
That is, so when you ask about what do children know, yeah, that's a very real conversation, but she knew what was happening, but this brought her comfort. So that we try to use any tool that allows them to stay connected. So that's one of my favorite glow in the dark stories.
That's really cool. And you know, kids think so differently, even than we do as adults. You know, I'm sure it was very important to her to know that he was going to have some light. He was going to have some comfort. It comforted her. So that's really cool.
And then when I saw her at a school 4 years later, and she came up and she goes, I remember the wristband. And I was like, oh my goodness. And of course it took me a few minutes because she had gotten a little bigger, taller, and I'm like, okay. But yeah, those are the powerful moments that we get to share. We get to hear the stories of connection. We also can help the children who struggle with an item. We had a person who grandpa's walking stick was by a door. He wouldn't let grandma move it, but for grandma it brought her pain, but he needed it there. So we encouraged him to take a picture of it. He took a picture of it, and then he came back and said, it can go now, because he had that memory that grandma didn't have to live with that pain.
Wow. Sometimes we just need to listen, hear, and they'll kind of guide us with what they need.
And we're grateful for everybody here in the leadership at Fairhope that allows us to grow this program and make it what it is today.
Well, Tracy, thank you. I thank you every day. I'm thankful for your whole team.
I appreciate that.
You do good work, and it's just been a blessing to have you on our show today. So for more information, remember, please call 740-654-7077. You're welcome to go on Facebook and read all about us and follow us. Also, the website, fairhopehospice.org. Remember to celebrate life always, and thank you for joining us today on Fairhope Hospice Today.
Interface Video presents Fairhope Hospice Today. Brought to you by Fairhope Hospice and Palliative Care, Fairfield Federal Savings and Loan, Fairfield Medical Center, the Fairfield County Board of Developmental Disabilities, Dagger Law, and the Frank E. Smith Funeral Home.